Hey there friends and folks! Today I'm going to take you through how to use liver of sulfur and why you might want to use it in the first place. I've referenced preferring oxidized pieces to bare pieces in most of my videos, but today I want to get into the nitty-gritty of how and why this works. So for starters, liver of sulfur comes in two forms, gel and rock. I've never worked with the rock form before, because from the get-go I was told by people with more experience than me that the gel is so much easier to work with, so I just stuck with the gel from the start and never strayed. You can find this gel at most local jewelry or rockhound shops, but if you can't find it somewhere local, then Rio Grande also has LOS for sale. You'll also need two non-reactive vessels, so glass or stainless steel are good. You'll need something to fish your pieces out of the sulfur with. I have this fork, but if you have tongs, those are probably better. You'll see me kind of fumble with this fork later. Just remember, non-reactive. All of my LOS vessels and tools are dedicated for this. I never use them for anything else. You'll also need some baking soda, some paper towels, gloves, and then there's an optional tumbling step at the end that I'll go over along with the tools you'll need for that then. So for starters, let's talk about this gel a little bit. You'll want to store it in a dark place, so I usually store it, along with the containers I use for it, under the sink. You'll always want to do this process outside or with proper ventilation because the fumes are indeed toxic. It also smells pretty bad because it is indeed sulfur and that smell will linger. So I've got my two non-reactive vessels. I'm going to prep my neutralizing vessel first, in which I will put about a tablespoon of baking soda and mix it with about 6 ounces of room temperature water. The temperature of the neutralizing solution isn't nearly as important as that of the liver of sulfur solution, but we'll get to that in a second. You'll want to mix about 1 teaspoon of liver of sulfur gel per 12 ounces of water. And as you can see here, my vessels are much smaller than that. You're welcome to use bigger vessels, but these have just worked for me forever, so I just keep using them. But because this jar is less than 12 ounces, I'll just do a little toothpaste-like squirt at the bottom of the jar there. Just a little dab, a little smattering. Then I'm gonna boil my water. You want your water to be at least warm. Standard is warm. The hotter the water, the faster your pieces will oxidize. Even with warm water, it's not a lengthy process at all and shouldn't take longer than a minute or two. With boiling water, this process only takes a few seconds. Even then, I'm showing you this process with some copper pieces today, but if you're working with sterling or fine silver, you can get some interesting color variation in there beyond your typical gray oxidizing, like greens, blues, purples, and even some reds. They're very subtle, but they're a lot of fun. These colors can be harder to achieve and hold because the process happens so quickly. You'll need to stay on your toes because only a matter of seconds will change the tone of your piece. Anyways, so I've boiled the water and I'm going to pour it into the jar that has that little dab of LOS gel and mix it to get it combined. If you're using just warm water, you'll get this lovely dehydrated piss yellow color, but if you're using hot water, this color will be darker and almost a brown. So I've got my LOS solution, my neutralizing solution, and my pieces, so I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. I'm using the timer today just to show you about how long this takes. I'm going to check my pieces at about 30 seconds and they look pretty much done. They won't need to go for another full 30, but just to be safe, I'll let them go for a few more seconds and then pull them out. And as you can see, I'm just so used to using this fork that I do, but it is definitely a struggle to get my pieces out of this container. It does not help that I'm actively trying to stay out of frame and can't really see what I'm doing. From my own experience, you really can't let these sit too long, within reason. If you leave your pieces for a few minutes and come back, they'll get as dark as they can and then stop. But if you forget about them for a few hours, it may be damaging to other parts of your piece, like if you're working with stones or beads. You never want to LOS a piece that has porous material like wood or cloth or even softer stones like lava stones. Pearls can be iffy. I've never personally had problems with LOS and pearls, but also because pearls are so delicate, that is the only time I would purposefully use warm water instead of boiling water. Even then, I know some purists and some artists who are strongly against using LOS with pearls, but as y'all know, my only strong feelings when it comes to the artistic process is do whatever you want, it's jewelry. Now that the pieces are done, I'll dip them in the neutralizing solution, make sure they get a good swirl, and then remove them to the paper towel. Now if I'm done with this batch of LOS, I'll fully neutralize this solution by pouring the neutralizing solution into the LOS solution. And I'll just leave this here for a few hours to overnight and then come back and it'll look like this. The water will be clear and the baking soda should have separated the sulfur out. You'll notice the strong sulfur smell will also be gone. This solution is now safe to pour down the sink, and I did hear somewhere that you can even pour this into your grass or into your garden, and it's good for plants, but I have nothing to back that up. I have no knowledge of gardening or pouring sulfur into plants, so that's just a rumor I've heard. Feel free to do your own research. Now you've achieved this lovely black patina, and you can just toss it right into the tumbler, but if you want to warm your piece up a bit, you can take some steel wool to it and buff certain areas back up. The reason you might want to do this is it adds a little bit more dimension to your piece. The oxidation will stay in the cracks and crevices of your piece while the surfaces will be brighter, thus adding more contrast. I LOS'd 2 pieces for this video because I want to show you an example of one that I've buffed it a little bit and one that I've just thrown straight in the tumbler. Even then, I'm not going to buff this too much, just enough to get a little bit of that copper tone peeking back out. And now for the tumbler. This is an optional step, but it's one that once I got in the habit, I never went back. You'll need a tumbler. This is a 3-pound rotary tumbler. You'll need some stainless steel shot, a mesh strainer, and you can buy special polishing solution, but I just use this original blue Dawn soap. You'll put your pieces in your tumbler with the shot. You're then going to add your soap or your solution. If you have a solution, I'm sure that it gives you exact proportions, but for soap, again, like a toothpaste-like dollop is good, but I like to go a little heavy-handed with the soap. You'll then add some room temperature water, just enough to cover your pieces. The amount of soap and amount of water you add is like any other step in the process. However little or much you add will effectively change the result you get, and I found that adding more soap gets it a little bit shinier, which I like, so I add more soap. But again, that's a fun thing that you can play with at home and decide what you like for your pieces. When I was first learning to tumble, we only ever used this soap, and I was instructed to never stray away from the original blue in solution or scent because this is the only one that works. I never tried anything beyond the blue, so I have no personal experience to speak to the truth of that, but the blue Dawn soap works great. And then you're going to tumble for about 30 minutes. Once those 30 minutes have passed, I'm going to bring a towel, my strainer, and my tumbler barrel over to the sink. I'm going to drain the barrel over the strainer and rinse the soap off as much as possible. I'll then lay the shot over the towel so that it dries efficiently, and then come back and dry my pieces with a paper towel, just patting them dry, being careful not to rub the patina. And there you have it, your beautifully oxidized pieces. A step that I'm going to talk about briefly, but I rarely do myself, so I don't really have the tools to show you, is sealing your patina. I personally don't like doing this because I love the way patinas naturally evolve and change with wear and time. I think there's a kind of beauty in the piece that you're wearing changing with you. I do know that there's a lot of people out there who are die-hard sealant fans and insist that you'll always want your piece to look exactly the same way and never change, and while that's totally valid, it's just not me. But if you do want to seal your piece, there are some good options out there. A popular choice is polishing wax. This Renaissance wax I have, but I rarely use because I would only suggest using it for solid metal pieces. If I'm sealing something that I've fold formed or working with sheet metal, I may use it, but with wire weaving, it gets caked in every nook and cranny and is a huge pain to effectively use. And then the spots where it gets caked, you can't fully flush out and they'll just kind of accumulate grime over time. So for wire weaving, wax polish is just not that great. You can also go the spray route, which would be ideal for woven pieces because it can evenly coat without caking. But the downside of that is that the spray will then also get all over your stone, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it will change the appearance and finish of your stone's surface. And with that, I think we've covered the basics of liver of sulfur. Hopefully that was informative without being too overwhelming. But as always, please let me know if you have any questions down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and of course, take care and be well.